In this video, I will argue that we need to reimagine what higher education is for. The reason is that we can see higher education being faced with considerable challenges today. We can meet these challenges by burying our heads in the sand, but a better strategy is instead to meet these challenges through a robust defense of the importance and place of higher education in society. We must be willing to give an answer to what makes higher education higher. I will offer part of the answer to what makes higher education higher in the next video. Here, I want to go into the challenges that higher education faces. These challenges vary in scope and spread depending on the context. In this video, I will limit myself to the challenges that we see in Europe and in North America. I believe these challenges exist elsewhere in the world as well, and that there are other, even more pressing challenges elsewhere. These are not the most important challenges necessarily in the world. Just to take one example, I think that the challenges we face in Sweden, where I live, for example, they are not as extensive or not as serious as those experienced in higher education in Ukraine right now. That being said, you can see how higher education is being challenged from at least 4 fronts. The first front is political. Higher education has never been completely separated from the influence of politics. On the other hand, there is currently an increase in criticism of higher education from political actors who want to question the authority and legitimacy of universities and other institutions of higher education. Just to take one much discussed example, one of the issues highlighted in America is the university's work of diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, which is associated with left-leaning ideologies and is therefore questioned. Higher education is also criticized for radicalizing students into opposing political power. This is also a consequence of the experience that universities have trivialized or overlooked the experience and values of certain groups in societies, an experience that political actors have then confirmed to gain political support. As a result of this and other reasons, higher education institutions are living under the threat of their funding being suspended. The other front is technological. While technological developments have always challenged practices and knowledge production in higher education, the advent of generative AI tools risks radically reshaping the conditions for teaching and research. AI raises the uncomfortable question of what purpose higher education really has. To take a few examples, is higher education really needed to help students understand texts? An AI tool can do that for them. Is higher education really needed to teach students to write texts? An AI tool can write a text for them faster and often better. Is it to contribute to their critical thinking? An AI tool can review what students are reading and offer them a critical analysis right away. So, if an AI tool can do most of what higher education teaches in a cheaper, faster, and possibly even better way, why is then higher education needed at all? In addition, we do not know what knowledge and skills the jobs of the future will require with the advent of AI. In such a situation, it becomes very difficult to organize courses that prepare students for a future that we find very difficult to predict. So, not only does AI risk turning higher education obsolete, higher education is also finding it harder to predict what the students will need in the future. The third front is demographic. In order to maintain institutions of higher education, they need a steady influx of students. Funding models are often attached to this, where funding for the higher education institutions is distributed based on the number of students you have. The problem for higher education is therefore that in Europe and in North America, but also elsewhere, we see a steady decline in birth rates. Students are thus simply starting to run out. which will force universities and other institutions of higher education to cut back on their operations, infrastructure, and staff. It has been argued that these democratic challenges do not have to be as large of a crisis as they might seem. It has been suggested that they can be solved to some extent by, among other things, admitting more foreign students. On the other hand, going back to the political front that challenges higher education today, there is also a political trend to reduce immigration within Europe and North America. Further crackdowns on immigration will thus leave higher education with fewer solutions to solve demographic challenges. The fourth is what we could describe as a fact-resistant front. Call it postmodernism, call it living in a post-truth era, call it that we care more about our identity-specific knowledge markers than about facts. Whatever we call it, it is clear that knowledge is not something that needs to be grounded in facts or good scientific practices anymore. Instead, truth is something that we increasingly get to decide for ourselves, where it can even be considered insulting if you question how well-founded anyone's claims are. The reasons are again that politicians who choose narratives consciously or unconsciously that serve their political purposes. But it is also that other actors and organizations that they put a lot of resources into creating these narratives because they serve specific ideological, cultural, religious, or economic purposes. New means of communication have also made it possible for fringe ideas to reach sympathetic people, where a critical mass of people can then emerge who can force a debate on an issue that was previously considered as settled. This trend plays into the trust that people have in higher education as previous stewards of knowledge, which further diminishes the ability of higher education to effectively contribute expertise and knowledge to society. From all these fronts, and possibly even from more fronts, higher education is being challenged. I do not want to trivialize these challenges. They are undeniably large and may radically change the conditions for higher education in the future, as they are already doing today. But instead of resigning in light of these challenges, we in higher education can see it as an opportunity to redefine higher education for the years to come. In the next video, I will argue that one way to address these challenges is to create a robust argument for what makes higher education unique, invaluable, and irreplaceable. In other words, we should be able to give an answer to the question, what makes higher education higher?